The Yu-Gi-Oh manga is strange. At least the spin-off manga are strange. I'd be the 200th YouTuber to remind you that Yu-Gi-Oh started as a manga about someone who played a wide variety of games to send bullies to the Shadow Realm before the sudden and staggering popularity of Magic and Wizards pigeonholed the franchise into a card game battler. But it's the follow-up mangas that make things goofy. Rather than just being a straight translation of what happens in the anime, the manga take the same general framework and characters before veering off in violently different directions. 5Ds has the benevolent Signer dragons turning into the nefarious Dual dragons, Zexal entirely drops Baryons as a plot point, and Arc V has an ending that still induces cringe throughout the entire community to this very day. But in this video, we're going to focus on how GX changed the game. In the anime proper, Jaden's later arc is defined by his relationship with Yubel, to the point where the two essentially become the same character. So what happens when you just remove Yubel from the narrative entirely? Well, at that point, you have to take out all of Jaden's gentle darkness and Supreme King nonsense, Nightmare gets booted from the plot, and now we have to pivot to a bunch of haughty exchange students under the thumb of an elder dark god looking to gather energy to free his beating, pulsating core from the heart of a fuzzball. Hope y'all like astronomy, because it's time we take a look through the whole solar system for legendary planets explained. Today's episode is brought to you by my lovely patrons, as well as the wonderful people over at Dragon Shield. Get the sleeves as strong as dragon scales and save 5% on your order by using coupon code GoldenNova at checkout. So, what's the deal with the legendary planets? Well, nothing. They're all big monsters, and each one is possessed of a strong and unique effect that makes for great tech picks in other strategies. So, let's travel through space and document each one. The Supremacy Sun is a level 10 Dark Fiend monster with 3000 attack and defense that can't be special summoned except by its own effect. After this face-up card on the field is destroyed and sent to the graveyard, during the standby phase of the next turn, you can discard a card to special summon this card from the grave. This gives it a kind of inevitable quality. As long as you have a card in hand to spare, you can bring it back over and over again no matter how many times it's destroyed. The problem is that destruction isn't really the best way to deal with monsters. If Sun gets banished, bounced, or even sent to the graveyard, it's all over. And it wouldn't be so bad if it didn't have any summon restriction attached to it. You could just pop it right back onto the board using any number of cards. But because you have to tribute summon it to get this started, it's not a very good value proposition. Especially since at this point in the game, 2 tributes can get you a conditional towers with quick removal. It just doesn't cut it. It's honestly a sad state to be in for what is essentially the final boss of GX's final boss monster. Call our other options Moon, because they have no problem eclipsing this one. Oh, a quick post-editing Nova moment here. It had totally slipped my mind that the Supremacy Sun actually has a secret second mode that makes it far more of a terrifying threat. And since it was used in the actual manga to power it up, let's give it some time here. Ebon's Sun is a continuous spell card with a few effects. First, if any number of face-up monsters you control are destroyed by a battle or card effect, you gain life points equal to their combined original attack. Second, if any number of monsters are special summoned face-up from your graveyard except during the damage step, you can target one of them and it gains 1000 attack. And if any number of spell or trap cards are discarded from your hand to the grave except during the damage step, you can target one of them and add it to your hand. Now, all of these are technically generic. They don't have to be used with a specific card or archetype, but line up really well with Supremacy Sun's whole kit. When it gets destroyed, you'll get a big 3000 life point chunk to work with to keep you in the game. When it revives itself, it turns into a 4000 attack monster, which now handles a lot more of higher end threats. And if you discard a spell or trap card for the revival of the Supremacy Sun, you get it right back, essentially making it a 0-cost summon. The beauty of the card is that these effects can be carried across archetypes, so this could actually have a ton of applications across a variety of themes. And thank goodness for that, because despite all the work it does to elevate this solar savage, it doesn't really fix any of my complaints about the card itself. Kinda makes you wonder why I halted the whole video to mention it for a completionist's sake. Anyway, have fun with the rest of the video. The Tripper Mercury is a level 8 Water Aqua monster with 2000 attack and defense, and when this card is tribute summoned, you can change all monsters on the field to face-up attack position. You can tribute summon this card with 3 tributes but not set it, and if summoned this way, while this card is on the field, all monsters your opponent controls lose attack equal to their original attack. Also, this card can just make a second attack during each battle phase. This is quite possibly my most favorite of all the legendary planets, leaving the opponents with only their attack boosts to work with, and in their now vulnerable attack state, combined with a double attack, means you're about to cause a lot of havoc to their life points. That being said, requiring 3 tributes to do all this does put it in the same realm as the Egyptian gods, so does this outclass them? Yeah, easily. Holy cows, this is wild. While it does lack the protection of Obelisk, you can put in just as much damage, and the gimmicks of Slifer and Raw, without the help of a number of ancillary support spell and trap cards, just don't compare to this. Where has this card been during all the God card discourse? This blows all the other ones out of the water. Splendid Venus is a level 8 light fairy monster with 2800 attack and 2400 defense, and all non-fairy monsters on the field lose 500 attack and defense. Also, the activation and effects of spell and trap cards activated on your field cannot be negated. Oh, now this is a proper creature. It provides a pretty substantial debuff anytime fairies aren't something you expect to run into, and ensuring the activation of all your spell and trap cards is outrageous. And heck, even if you run into another fairy, 2800 is a pretty substantial attack stat. And there are no summon restrictions attached to this. You can special summon this and still get all the benefits. This makes for an extremely good pairing with counter fairies, as now all the stuff that makes them run is now a lot harder to interact with, though it's not good for all fairy decks. A Weather Painter, for instance, is flush with them, and they have a ton of spell and trap cards, but their effects give effects to the monsters. They don't really activate their own themselves, so they gain no benefit from Venus. And that's not the only thing out of place here. Where did the go? All the legendary planets are supposed to have the in there. Where the heck is it? Elemental Hero Terra Firma is a level 8 Earth Warrior fusion monster with 2500 attack and 2000 defense, requiring Elemental Hero Ocean and Elemental Hero Woodsman as material. It must be fusion summoned and cannot be special summoned by other ways. You can tribute a face-up Elemental Hero monster, and this card gains attack equal to the tributed monster's attack until the end phase. That's right, one of the planets was hiding out in a whole other archetype the whole time! Jaden, and by extension his mentor, Koyo Hibiki, hold on to this card for a while until it's reclaimed by Tragoedia temporarily. I wish I had more to say about it, but A, go watch the big giant hero video I made about them, you silly Billy, and B, even in Heroes proper, this card is beyond underwhelming. It's got terrible fusion material, its effect sucks, and it doesn't even have an impressive stat line. No wonder Tragoedia got folded, he's drawing his power from this kind of card. The Blazing Mars is a level 8 Fire Pyro monster with 2600 attack and 2200 defense, and while this card is in your hand or grave, you can banish 3 other monsters from your grave to special summon this card. Also, you can't special summon other monsters for the rest of the turn. During your main phase 1, you can send all other monsters you control to the grave to burn your opponent for 500 damage for each monster sent to the grave. Damn, that main phase 1 restriction is holding back a lot of damage. Imagine having the ability to do this after smacking your opponent with a full board of monsters, but I guess we're getting into a real Dark Strike Fighter situation at that point, so maybe best avoided. That being said, at some point your opponent is going to have dipped down low enough in life points where a little bit of extra free burn damage will close out the game. In fact, it's appropriate that the big burning ball of damage is part of Axel Brody's deck in the manga. Thank goodness someone is playing to type. So you can hit your opponent with a bunch of Volcanic Burn ticks, and if Volcanic Emperor doesn't burn for enough to close out the game, Blazing Mars gives you the chance to close things out without having to rely on the passive burn damage of Emperor. Now, sadly, its tech options are pretty limited to just working with Volcanics, but I think it makes for a pretty nifty emergency game ending button. But despite the monstrous appearance and aggressive effect, the monster is actually pretty chill, you know, because it's always blazing it. The Grand Jupiter is a level 8 Dark Warrior monster with 2500 attack and 2000 defense, and once per turn you can discard 2 cards, then target a face-up monster your opponent controls and equip that face-up monster to this card. This card gains attack equal to the combined original attack of the monsters equipped to it by this effect, and once per turn, during the end phase, you can target a monster card equipped to this card by this card's effect and special summon it to your field. A legendary planet that absorbs the power of other monsters, has 2500 attack and defense, and as a warrior seems pretty familiar. Yeah, so this is like a fixed opposite version of Terra Firma, and yes, It is being used by Aster Phoenix, why do you ask? I love this card. It's got vibes of Silent Honor Arc in there, where it's both removal and a buff. And if we want, we can even summon the monster back to our own field if it's a sweet enough addition. And it also lacks any kind of special summon restrictions. The only real pain here is going to be that discard cost. Pitching 2 adds up over time if you don't have an engine keeping you topped up, so don't expect to do this turn after turn after turn. But with an effect as powerful as this, the duel may not last long enough for it to matter. With the ability to suck up your opponent's monsters and add their power to your own, you'll have no problem storming your opponent's defenses. The Big Saturn is a level 8 Dark Machine monster with 2800 attack and 2200 defense that can't be special summoned from the hand or deck. Once per turn, you can discard a card and pay 1000 life points to give this card 1000 attack until the end phase, and when this card in your possession is destroyed by your opponent's card effect and sent to the grave, both players take damage equal to this card's attack in the grave, which is basically always going to be 2800. So you set this up on the field and it becomes a ticking time bomb, ready to drop a buttload of damage on everyone. Though, if we're being honest, you're the one holding the shorter end of the fuse. True, when you pay 1000 life points for that boost, you can potentially pay your opponent back by hitting them with a really solid punch, but that's if it connects. If your opponent mirror forces you, or something more relevant to non-Yugi boomers in the crowd, you're still stuck holding the check. Now, because it doesn't restrict graveyard summons, I feel like you're supposed to keep reviving this to slam your opponent with big chunks of damage over and over again, but because it only triggers when your opponent destroys it by a card effect, it's not like you can count on that happening, which is a huge shame. This is one of the cleanest, coolest mech designs I've seen in Yu-Gi-Oh! Maybe out of the entirety of Mecha. The Big Saturn is giving Big O energy. The Despair Uranus is a level 8 light rock monster with 2900 attack and 2300 defense, and when this card is tribute summoned while you control no spell or trap cards, you can activate this effect. Your opponent declares either continuous spell or continuous trap. Then you can set a card of that type directly from your deck. This card gains 300 attack for each face-up spell and trap card you control, and face-up cards in your spell and trap zone can't be destroyed by card effects. A utility monster for any back row deck that's got a few too many monsters to burn, Uranus gives you a free back row to work with and keeps all your important cards safe. Well, not all of them, only the ones in your spell and trap zone, so don't expect to use this to keep your field spells safe. But everything else is all clear. The main problem is that it's your opponent that chooses the kind of card you tutor up, but that still puts them in an interesting conundrum. Continuous spell cards are quicker to deploy, sure, but continuous trap cards tend to have some of the strongest effects in the game, and Uranus's protection is going to make it a lot harder to get rid of. So Uranus is going to test one of your most important skills, bluffing that one type of card is more threatening than the other in your particular circumstance, so your opponent gives you what you want. And no matter what, the more back row you have, the more powerful this card gets. 300 is not a great boost to go by, but from a base of 2900, it turns into a pretty big bruiser. Though, I'm gonna be honest, I feel like it should have more protections than it currently has. I mean, look at it. Around the face, that circle with the two outstretched lines, kind of like the lids of the classic Egyptian eye motif. That's right, this thing shouldn't be able to destroy anything in battle because it's actually a secret illusion monster! The Tyrant's Neptune is a level 10 water reptile monster with 0 attack and defense that can't be special summoned. You can tribute summon this card by tributing a single monster, and this card gains the total original attack and defense of the monsters tributed for its tribute summon. And when this card is tribute summoned, target an effect monster in the grave that was tributed for the tribute summon. And this card's name becomes that target's name, and this card gains that target's effects. It is so hard to introduce a card like this because it feels like so much of it is bundled together and all of it is far too much. So let's just jump right into it. This card is currently banned, and for very good reasons. Effects are given to monsters for very specific reasons. For instance, a monster may be able to attack twice during a battle phase, or get you a really good benefit for destroying a monster in battle. But its stats aren't that good, that way it's not doing tons of damage or running over everything. But slap that onto a monster that now suddenly has 4500 attack, and now you've got yourself a problem. And while there are a borjillion combinations that might work to make the Tyrant Neptune a terrifying presence, you only needed one to get it banned, and that was its interaction with Lyrilisk Independent Nightingale. Its attack and burn damage are all based on its level, so being a base level 1 monster keeps that in check. with some scaling level effects to reward you for investing in your Xyz monsters. However, when you go straight to level 10, you're now dealing 5,000 points of burn damage with little other investment. Not to mention that the attack boost from Neptune's own effect and the Lyrilisc one puts it at 6,000 attack, more than ready to clear out the game through almost any attack position monster. And that's not counting any additional attack that you get from the second monster if you use one. But all that doesn't matter now, because as a banned card, all of its potential is now on hold. But honestly, there are way too many tyrants out here today, like in real life. I'm a fan of keeping this one locked up for as long as possible. The Suppression Pluto is a level 8 Dark Fiend monster with 2600 attack and 2000 defense, and once per turn you can declare a card name, then look at your opponent's hand. Then, if they have the declared card in their hand, apply one of these effects. Take control of one monster your opponent controls, or destroy a spell or trap card your opponent controls, then you can set the destroyed spell or trap card on your field. This means Pluto prizes hand knowledge above all else. Now, granted, knowing what your opponent has in their grip is already one of the strongest effects in the game. The fact a card is terrible as a pointer of the Red Lotus is banned should be saying something. So stating that this card benefits from having hand knowledge is like saying your tournament run is benefited by winning. You were already going to be trying to do the latter if you could, the former is just incidental. That being said, this also punishes your opponent for searching out cards, kind of like Mind Crush would do back when it was good. Because you basically have to reveal anything that you search from your deck to your hand that has any kind of specific value to it. This means this can mess with your opponent if they decide to indulge in a bit of consistency without getting the card out of their hand before you can use Pluto. And the payoff is pretty huge. Stealing cards from your opponent has been universally good since it provides such a swing in momentum, with the only limiting factor being how difficult it is to pull it off. Mind Control? Easy included at its peak. Enemy Controller? Great utility with an extra steal mode just in case. The Suppression Pluto? Well, it's good, but it's not that good. You have to land the monster, and your opponent has to be in a state where they've revealed a card in their hand, so you're not trying to make it work blindly. Thankfully, Pluto has you revealing your opponent's hand no matter what, so even if you whiff, you still get that sweet, sweet hand knowledge. And that's pretty valuable all on its own. It's just a shame you have to commit so many resources to getting this on board first, as you might not have much more to actually help you close out the game from that point on. So, if you can pendulum summon this, hey, be my guest, and partake of the forbidden knowledge as best you can. And honestly, Pluto's gonna need all the screen time they can get. That way they can rack up all the royalties. They've got extra mouths to feed. Namely, the ones on his knees. Where does any of that food go? Now, that's all the planets, but there is one more character that's pretty keyed into their story. So let's take this opportunity to cover a card that's more famous than all of these other cards put together. Tragoedia, a level 10 Dark Fiend monster with question mark attack and defense. When you take battle damage, you can special summon this card from your hand. It gains 600 attack and defense for each card in your hand, and once per turn, you can send a monster from your hand to the grave. Then target a face-up monster your opponent controls with the same level the sent monster had in the hand and take control of that face-up monster. And once per turn, you can target a monster in your graveyard, and this card's level becomes the same as that target's until the end of this turn. This card was the successor, or maybe even companion, to Gore's Emissary of Darkness, a big, threatening monster that sits in your hand, waiting for your opponent to slip up and get too aggressive, letting you turn the tables and take the game. But Gore's was easy to play around because it could only be played while you had a blank field. Tragoedia, on the other hand, only cared about taking battle damage. The big hurdle would be if you had enough cards in hand for it to survive that battle phase. As it didn't automatically have a huge body, that made a token that would also be a pretty huge body. But if it did, boy howdy you were in for a treat. Its level-changing effect gave Tragoedia the flexibility needed to facilitate a number of different Xyz and Synchro plays, and the conditional brand control works really well when both players are running monsters that are low to the ground. And if you can keep your resources close to your hand, you have a decently sized monster to bully your opponent with. It's an interesting card because its power doesn't come from doing anything particularly well, but has a toolbox of effects that give you a stupendous amount of utility. The card's biggest sins are that it's far too reactive for modern lists, and does rely a ton on proper setup to make the most of it. But for its time, Tragoedia was a force to be reckoned with, and is probably the closest out of any card in this video to matching the menace and power they displayed in the manga. It's just a real Tragoedia that the rest couldn't keep up. And that's all I've got for the legendary planets. I'd love to have a tech pick section here, but with all the cards serving such different purposes, this whole video is more of a tech pick section of its own, showing how wild and off base they can be. So in lieu of that, I'd like to hear what kind of decks you play that incorporate the legendary planets. Got any fairy decks you love sleeving up Venus with? Any control decks that bring out Uranus for that extra line of protection? Let me know down below, as well as letting me know why the Tripper Mercury is your favorite. And if you haven't already, please be sure to like the video if you liked it, subscribe if you haven't already, and be sure to share this video with somebody you know who loves Yu-Gi-Oh! It really does a lot to help me out. Today's episode is brought to you by Dragon Shield. Get the sleeves as strong as dragon scales and get 5% off your order by using the coupon code GoldenNova at checkout. It was also brought to you by my lovely patrons, including this month's illustrious Quasar Commanders, Upstairs Media and the Critic of Innocence, Nebula Navigator's 3rd Dynasty, 50 Gigabytes, Ada Basilisk, Adam Zajdel, Ancient Wizard, Andrew Newman, Battle Axe, Kane Senpai, Chibi Gohan, Christopher Fuss, Clockswork, Comrade Copperbottom, Eric, Frankie, Garland Chaos, Green Knight, Great Big Pillock, Hair Bear, Happy Majin, Harry the Ominous Benefactor, Iron Zero, Iskander 711, Carp, Marion James E. Picata, Millennia Asta, Muse Clark, Neon Yaminair, Orozco 09096, Panther J, Bat Boos, Rebel King Lucifer, Red Eyes Jackalow, RJ the Jank Monarch, Thievery Coast and the Wizard Moose, Cosmic Crusaders Ally Vatnia, Animasta, Anthrac, Baron von Titty Sprinkles, Beelzebub, Fish, Beluga Masta, Blitzwolf, Charlie Mercury, Chaz Ghost, Dr. Entity RIP, Aaron the World Breaker, Eva Padilla, Gary Lickbread, Hike Boyagian, Herbal D, Inblink, Kale the Dragon, Lobomaru02, Manga Pages, Matt Simmons, Natiel Lee Alexander, Nitromo, Not Al Gore, Nyx, Obsidian, Rainer Leong, Rhyme Kairos, Schwinny, Shizuka Nijimura, Sir Knight JCB, Sophie, apparently, Sphilia, Stephen Williamson, The Legendary Raven, The Phantom Knights of Shitted Pants, The Gene, Tiger X2476, Weasel King of Weaseltown, and Zaldureka, as well as the wonderful Starlight Explorers you see on screen now. If you'd like to help me in my journey to cover all of Yu-Gi-Oh's archetypes, get my videos early, be a part of these credits and other awesome perks, it would mean the world to me if you would check out the link to my Patreon in the description or consider joining as a YouTube member. And if you'd like to see more of the strange black sheep of the Legendary Planets line, check out this gigantic video where I cover every hero monster in the whole game. Or, if you want another archetype that loves using the planets as their monikers, check out this video about the agents. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.